So joining me now for right versus left, we've got the former Labour Party advisor, Matthew Laza. Somebody put Lanza, didn't
I
they?
know. I'm going to start singing. I do my Lanza impression.
We've got the media advisor and communication coach, Linda Duberley. Thanks for coming on, and it's your first time. We mentioned earlier about the Israel conflict and how it affects the Labour Party. Look, we've got a general election next year, Matthew, and this is something that Starmer doesn't need at the moment. It's dividing his party. We saw earlier this week that I think it was 300 odd Labour councillors have written to Sir Keir Starmer to ask him to back a ceasefire. What's he going to do?
Well, look, I think it is by far the biggest political crisis that Keir's faced since he became leader. Certainly inside the party, it is the biggest challenge that he's had. I think that what he's done is this week we saw him give his speech where he set out in detail his position, which I think was very reasoned and sensible. And I think, frankly, if I'd been advising him, I've got him to do that 10 days before, much sooner after the now sort of infamous LBC interview where he appeared to give Israel a blank cheque, and that's what really spooked the party. Because it's not just the hard left in the party. Lee, you will remember what it was like back in the day. But the party, the party's full of quite what you might call kind of woolly, PC, charity, international development types. That's the kind of the party's. It's quite a sort of. It wears its heart on its sleeve, and that's what's driving this. It's not driven by support for Hamas. It's not driven by anti-Semitism. It's driven by what you may argue is a naive, and that's what Keir did in his speech. But it's a kind of naive belief in doing the best for the people of Gaza. And so I think now Keir set out his position, it's incumbent on the party to rally around that. And Keir will have to be firm if people don't.
It's OK being naive, Linda, but this is a chap who wants to be the Prime Minister.
That's right, that's exactly what I thought. There's no point in talking about naivety if you want to actually run the country. Now, the point is, he's got behind this idea of the ceasefire, but Matt's exactly right. He should have done that 10 days ago. He should have done that really, really fast, but he didn't. And the thing is now, it's obvious that he's caught between a rock and a hard place. And actually, just think back a couple of weeks to how ebullient he was and pleased he was at the victories at Tamworth and Mid-Beds, and now he's got this massive situation right in front of him. Now, I listened to the speech live at Chatham House. I thought, actually, it was a good speech. And, you have to measure your audience. That wasn't the kind of speech where you do a big oratorial delivery. It was a short and reasoned speech outlining his position, but he has to nail his feet to the floor now. Yeah. He can't budge.
Absolutely, yeah. He has to. Now he's set out the position clearly. I think you're absolutely right. It is now what the party needs to do is needs to give Keir the space to show the leadership that he needs. And look, frankly, we cannot have people virtue signalling, whether they're mayors or councillors.
Well, that's true. I mean, Linda, it might have been a decent speech, but those waiting outside didn't think so, did they?
No, but at the end of the day, when you make that kind of important speech, and it was important, you have to choose exactly what you're going to do in terms of priorities. And it was the right speech for the audience internally. And actually, when it was broadcast, I thought it was fairly effective. But at the end of the day, he's still between a rock and a hard place, and Matthew, this won't change.
Matthew, he likes to leap onto the odd bandwagon, does Sir Keir. So which one is he going to choose?
No, he's been absolutely consistent on his position on the start. He wasn't consistent in how he outlined on the LBC interview because he got into a mess.
That was a shocker, wasn't it?
Look, absolutely. As somebody who was the head of broadcasting for the Labour Party, that would have been one of my nightmare days if I'd still been in the job. And I think having protesters outside a speech is always a good look for a Labour leader because it shows that the hard left, the British people don't feel affinity with, are against you. It shows you in the mainstream.
That's always a good look, though, Matthew, when some of them protesters are actually supported by some of the MPs on the back benches.
I don't think the MPs on the back benches are supporting the protesters. Look, he was absolutely right just to suspend Andy McDonald, who used From the River to the Sea, and he should be equally hard on anybody else who does that.
Linda's
That's different to calling for a ceasefire.
Militarily, you can't start a war and then a couple of weeks in launch a ceasefire because you have not even started to achieve your objectives.
So a ceasefire, Matthew, but at the right time.
Yeah, we need humanitarian pauses so that aid can get in. It's looking like the aid situation is looking a little brighter, which will help Keir. Frankly, the more distressing the pictures are from Gaza, the harder his position will be. That's what will be driving it. Because, as I say, this has been driven by, the people side, not the people who support Hamas, which is, not people in the Labour Party, and the one guy who used the chant is out, but the people, the sort of mass opinion, not just the Labour Party, but what you might call kind of left of centre opinion, are driven by the pictures. They're driven by that humanitarian concern. So we need more aid needs to get into Gaza, and then that would help Keir politically, and would also, obviously, above everything else, be good for the situation on the ground.
I mean, we've spoken about what's happening in Israel, Linda, but it's important what happens on our own turf as well when it's the next general election.
Yeah, I mean, this situation now isn't going to ease up before the next general election. That's the point. And as Matt was saying, with those images coming out of the Gaza Strip, they are going to just add more and more fuel to the fire, because they are images. The issue with October the 7th and what happened there is we've heard about awful, heinous, barbarous crimes, but we are now looking at these images all the time. Last night we heard that surgeons were operating without anaesthetic. Now, the problem is that is going to make a big difference on the streets in this country. And a lot of people I know, including my family, who live in this constituency, are genuinely concerned now that the whole thing will ignite.
Matthew.
I think that's a real danger, and of course social media is absolutely driving it. I mean, I was just thinking earlier on the way here about the Iraq War. If you can you imagine that, you know, when Labour MPs were under pressure over the Iraq War, if we'd been living in the age of Twitter and social media, they'd have all had to individually declare their positions. It would have been intolerable. I don't think, but I think Blair wouldn't have got it through.
But I tell you what doesn't help: some of the reporting by the mainstream media, like the BBC, reporting incorrect facts. I think they held their hands up. Yeah. I mean, this doesn't help anything, does it, to unite us as a country?
In this situation, you can't jump the gun too quickly. When I believe that the BBC said that that rocket that landed on the hospital had been fired by Israel, you've got to check that stuff out, because rockets, they're like bullets. They have a profile, and you can check them out. You'll have a reasonable view of who fired that within 2 hours, and a much better view within 12 hours. I've spoken to crash investigators on this subject, and the fact of the matter is 30% of those missiles that Hamas was sending over the border misfire.
Yeah,
that should have been obvious.
The BBC too quick to get the headline out.
In the instance where they, I mean, he didn't absolutely say it was Israel. He sort of said it looked like it was. Yeah. That was too much. It needs a calm. It needs a breath. Look, it's incredibly difficult reporting from the field, but even so, because it's so important and has such an incendiary effect with communities around the world, you need to have that breath and just establish the facts first. So I think that things have calmed down on the BBC, and that breath has been taken in more recent days. But the problem now is it's everything's clipped, everything's taken out of context. Everything circulates on social media. Yeah. People live in an echo chamber on social media, whichever echo chamber it is, left, right, whether you're in the Muslim community or not. People are listening to voices that they want to.
And you listen to TikTok now, which is the fastest growing social media platform. Yeah. And you've got to the situation now where people believe, experts now believe, digital experts, that actually social media can instigate incidents, not just reflect them, but actually instigate them.
I agree. We see that with young people, don't we?
Yeah. I think you know. So therefore, it is incumbent on everybody else to, you know, the traditional sources of information to be as calm as possible. And so I'm glad that the BBC is just, I think it's just, as I say, it's that sort of little breath. It's just that calmness that it needs in its reporting, so it is fair and accurate.
But Linda, is the media out of control on this? I don't just mean the mainstream media, I mean social media, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. People can pretty much publish what they want.
I mean, that really worries me, because I do a lot of advisory work for our emergency services, and I honestly, a bigger and bigger chunk of what I talk about is social media, citizen journalism. Now, citizen journalism has its place. When you look at open source intelligence, that can be quite a valuable thing. But actually, when you've got people out with a high-vis jacket and citizen journalists written on the back and photographing with their iPhones, you know, broadcast standard pictures.
Yeah, but we talk about citizen journalists, but when the BBC, printing headlines like that, Matthew, and setting the bar so low, what do you expect from citizens?
I think, look, it clearly, with the missteps that the BBC made, not just the BBC, ITV News has been criticised this in recent days for who it's been interviewing. That loses your moral high ground, as it were, and so that's why it's imperative for all traditional media outlets to realise that, frankly, the standards are more important than ever, because, as you say, they need to be the clear beacon on the hill with clear factual.
But you know what? When I was a kid growing up, my dad used to say to me, and most parents did say, "Don't believe out you read in paper." And,
that's true.
I think it's still true today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's what, you know, everybody should think everything with a pinch of salt. They should think about the source. Don't you agree?
Totally. But I'm a former newspaper journalist. I've had 3 staff jobs on 3 different national newspapers.
And I work for the BBC, so between us, we've got the mainstream media covered.
So we've got it covered. But the fact of the matter is, as I say to people when I'm doing any coaching, that the mainstream media has a lot of checks and balances. Now, there may be some problems early on with the BBC that Deborah Turner did.
They were picked up.
press.
OK,
They were
guys, look,
picked
so
up.
we've got two journalists on the panel today. You know, it's probably one of the most untrustworthy professions in the world.
No, who always speaks journalists and untrustworthy stakes?
Listen,
Politicians.
please do not go away, because coming up next, we've got the brilliant Francine Lewis. Looking forward to her to do some great impressions.